In this edition of In the Trenches with Dave Lapham, brought to you by First Star Logistics, 1988 MVP Boomer Esiason breaks down the first 9 games of the Cincinnati Bengals schedule, right up to the bye week. On a game-by-game basis, Boomer Esiason gives you his thoughts and what he thinks might be the outcome of the first 9 games of the schedule. You're in the Trenches with Dave Lapham, brought to you by First Star Logistics. As you can tell, we're in our beautiful studios, and we're joined now by the legendary, and I mean legendary, Boomer Esiason, quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals, 1988, most valuable player as he took the Bengals to Super Bowl 23. Boomer, welcome, my man.
Dave, it's always great to see you. Thanks for having me in the trenches with you.
Appreciate that. I know you always took care of your guys in the trenches, Boomer. I don't think I've seen a love affair that was better than Bengals offensive line with their quarterback, Boomer Esiason. Man, you were the best with those guys.
You know what, Dave? I will tell you this. If I were playing today, making the money that these guys are making, my offensive line would be really happy. They'd all be driving Raptor trucks. They'd have as many shotguns as they want. I'd take them out to dinner every night. I mean, I would wine and dine these guys like you wouldn't believe. And then come Sunday, they'd be a bunch of rabid dogs protecting me.
Well, that was your MO, Boomer. I mean,
yes.
Every offense, this guy takes care of us like you wouldn't believe it, bro. You wouldn't believe it. All right, so let's talk schedule. 2021 season, Cincinnati Bengals open up at home, Minnesota Vikings. Mike Zimmer went on record last year saying that this was the worst defense I've ever had. They were decimated by injury and COVID opt-outs and all those kind of things. What do you expect from the Minnesota Vikings defense and offense as they match up against the Bengals?
You know what? I think the Vikings are one of these 9-8, 10-7 teams. Think about that, 9-8 and 10-7. I haven't really said much of that, so we got to get used to saying those kind of numbers. They're a middling team. They're not a great team. They're a good team. I think Mike Zimmer is a terrific coach. I know the Wolf family loves him as their head coach. Their quarterback is a little bit frustrating and maddening. He puts up huge numbers, but they usually get down in games. So he ends up throwing a lot in the second half. But they do have one of the most explosive running backs in all of football, and he's their James Brooks. You know, he's Dalvin Cook, and he's a tremendous, tremendous football player. I mean, he can do it all. He's a 3-down back. He very rarely comes off the field. But the big question for me will be exactly what you just pointed out, whether or not this defense is going to be improved. I got to believe it will be improved just simply because they get all these guys back. They spent some money in free agency. They just extended their safety. So I think that they're going to be a good team. They're going to be a good, solid team. They're not a great team. They're not in the top tier of 6 teams in the NFL, but they nonetheless will be a very, very formidable opponent opening weekend in Cincinnati.
Do you think Mike Zimmer will try to keep 2 safeties deep and not give up the big explosive play? And at that point, it's up to the Bengals to run them out of that, and say, you're going to have to start to sink somebody down in the box here, to stop this running game. What do you think?
Well, it's going to be, it's the game within the game, and it's the adjustments that need to be made and how, well can they disguise what they're trying to do on the back end to try to confuse Joe Burrow. The one thing we saw last year from Joe Burrow is he can read defenses. All I know is if you line up man coverage across the board against these 3 wide receivers, you're asking for trouble. Joe is a great down the field thrower. He's extremely accurate. He stands tall in the pocket. He'll hold it a little bit, which is sometimes, comes back to haunt him. The other thing too, Dave, we talk a lot about offensive lines in the NFL and, how good are they, where do they rank and all this other stuff. A lot can be helped by the quarterback. If the quarterback is decisive, the quarterback's quick getting rid of the ball, the quarterback is able to run and extend plays, all these attributes that Joe Burrow has should take off a significant amount of pressure on the offensive line. So his understanding of playing against defenses in the NFL, coupled with a healthy left tackle, hopefully Jonah Williams, and you have now, what I consider a player who is now far advanced mentally from where he was last year in Joe Burrow, that should just basically lock up the offense a little bit more and make it less mistake prone. So hopefully that will be the case. All I know is if I'm Mike Zimmer, I'm not playing a lot of man coverage in this game. I'm just not going to do that. D. Higgins is a beast. And the thing about it is that he is so big. And I think there's a trust factor between that you have to take into account if you're a defensive coordinator. Now, Jamar has not had a great preseason. I know that. There's been a lot of drop passes and things of that nature. But once he gets into the game and they get flowing, which they haven't had an opportunity to do yet, he's going to be fine. And I think he's a playmaker. I just would not play a lot of man coverage against the Bengal offense, especially at the start of the season.
Going to be an interesting football game. Winnable game for the Cincinnati Bengals in your mind, Boomer?
I think it is. I think, they're going to be offensively, I think they're going to be a really good team. I think they have a potential to be a top 10 offensive team. They need to stay healthy. Joe needs to find that, rhythm that he had last year. Defensively is where I would be concerned if I were, a Bengal fan. Special teams wise, who knows? You never know how that's going to look until the season starts. But, just looking at the two main aspects of a football team, offense and defense, I think offense, they're growing. Defense, I know they brought in defensive guys in the offseason, drafted defensive guys, but they weren't a great defense last year. So I don't necessarily know that they're going to be a great defense this year. They may have to win a lot of games, like, 27-24, 31-28, that type of thing. And I think that they have the firepower on offense definitely to do that and to stay with most of these teams, as they get into the fourth quarter.
All right. That's the opener, and we spent a lot of time in the opener, rightfully so. It's the big game to start the season. We'll rip through the rest of these games a little bit, Boomer. A few comments on each one. Game 2, travel to Chicago. Andy Dalton, former Bengal, at quarterback, potentially. I mean, he's been named the starter. I guess depending how he plays week 1, Justin Fields is lurking. What do you think about Bengals at Bears?
The Bears are going to have a good defense. I hope Andy's playing, because if he's playing, that means he's playing well, and Justin Fields doesn't have to play. But, the Bear fan is going to be like the Bengal fan. Get me the guy, put him out there. I think the Bears are trying to do right by Andy because, they didn't know that Justin Fields was going to fall in the draft. Maybe they would have had a shot at Mac Jones. Who knows? But they decided to roll the dice and go up and get Justin Fields as he was falling. And they had already signed Andy before they drafted him. So I think they told Andy, look, if you come here, and I'm sure there were other teams that wanted Andy to go there, if you come here, we'll give you a shot at being the starter. And I think they're trying to be fair and they're trying to be honest, but let's be realistic. Being realistic in the NFL means a young guy that you draft is going to end up playing at some point this season. So I think the Bengals are a little bit lucky that they'll most likely catch the Bears with Andy Dalton, and hopefully they don't have to deal with Justin Fields and his cannon for an arm and him running all over the place.
Bengals go to Pittsburgh next. Give me your take on that one, Boomer.
Pittsburgh's defense is still going to be one of the best in the league. They got two of the best players in T.J. Watt and Minkah Fitzpatrick. Devin Bush should be back. These guys are loaded on defense, and wide receiver wise too, they're loaded. And even though Ben's only, he's 39 years old and everybody's saying he's washed up, I mean, he led his team to an 11-0 season last year. And then all of a sudden their season got upset because of what happened in Tennessee, the COVID situations. Right. And they had to play a wacky schedule and everything just kind of got out of whack for them. And they had a ton of defensive injuries and they stopped running the ball. This year they draft Najee Harris. They will run the ball more this year. This will be, again, a very, very difficult team to beat in Pittsburgh, assuming that Ben stays healthy and they can run it again with a new offense coordinator, Matt Canada. I think it's going to be a very difficult game for Cincinnati.
All right, so we're saying Minnesota's winnable, Chicago's winnable, Pittsburgh tough.
Yes.
All right, so let's go to game number 4, Thursday night football game in Cincinnati against the Jacksonville Jaguars.
You got to take care of Jacksonville. You're a better team. I know that they got a super stud quarterback in Trevor Lawrence, but again, a rookie. I could see Trevor having a year kind of like Justin Herbert had last year, kind of like the year that Joe Burrow had last year. He's got the it factor. He's got the arm. But this is a team that's totally in rebuilding mode. The Bengals are a year ahead of that in terms of Jacksonville. So it's a much more of a winnable game, if you ask me.
All right. So now their Bengals are sitting at 2-2, and the Green Bay Packers and Aaron Rodgers come to Cincinnati.
Hold on to your hat.
Woo!
Dave, like we talk about these games and we try to predict them, but we're sitting here 6 weeks away from that game,
Right.
and who knows who's going to be playing in that game. So we're taking an assumption that everybody that's supposed to be in the game is playing in the game. If Aaron Rodgers is playing in the game and they're healthy on defense, this is one of the top 4 teams in the league, and a very, very difficult game for Cincinnati.
So they're 2-3 at that point, and then they travel to Detroit to take on the Lions. What do you think?
One of the worst teams in the league, I think. No matter what Dan Campbell says, he's seems like a fun guy and a fun coach to play for. Former players we know, and he's got some wild statements already made. I'm not a believer in what they're doing this year, and I think that they did. They did Matthew Stafford a huge favor in trading him to the Los Angeles Rams, who I think will have a big year, and I think he's going to have a big year. But this is a game that's another winnable game for the Bengals. And, look, all these games are tough. You and I both know that. But if we're going to play this game, I would say this is probably a Bengal win.
All right, so let's give them a 3-3 mark at that point, and then they travel to Baltimore to take on the Ravens. A tough chore.
Well, let's face it, Baltimore is one of the worst passing teams in football. Everybody talks about their lack of depth at wide receiver. They got wide receivers. They just don't throw the ball well. That's not who they are. They are a running team first, and you gotta crowd the line, and you got to stop Lamar Jackson. He's a guy that, much like Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen in Buffalo, they extend plays. They're running all over the place. They're incredible athletes. When they get put on the football field, they feel comfortable. But this is a game, I don't think Baltimore defensively is as good as it's been in past years. This is a game that the Bengals will be right there with them. I'm not as bullish on Baltimore as everybody else seems to be this year. I think that they may take a step back.
So you're talking potential toss-up there.
Yeah, definitely, 100%. And anytime you have a quarterback that likes to run as much as Lamar does, and they call running plays for him, man, I just hold my breath every week he plays. I just hope he doesn't get hurt.
All right, and then after the Baltimore game, for the 3rd week in a row, the Bengals are on the road. They travel to Detroit, they travel to Baltimore, and then they go to New York and take on the New York Jets. What do you think?
Another very winnable game. The Jets defensively are not that great. They don't have any significant pass rushers. As a matter of fact, they had Carl Lawson, but he blew out his Achilles in preseason. Bengal fans are very aware of him, and as he had 2 major knee injuries, but he was having a great camp. They are young at cornerback. Their cornerbacks are basically a bunch of kids that nobody's ever heard of. Their safety position is good. The interior defensive line is good. But this is a game in which, the Bengals got to be able to put up 30 points on the Jets. And the Jets coming out with a rookie quarterback. They do have a good, solid group of wide receivers around him. And Zach Wilson has looked good in preseason. But you got to win the games against the rookie quarterbacks, especially when they're playing with a suspect defense the way the Jets will be playing in this game. So I like the Bengals here to go on the road and win another one.
Okay, so let's say they're 4-4 at that point. That Baltimore game, I'm going to, close game, but I'll probably say that Baltimore at home might squeak it out. So it's 4-4. And then the Bengals have Cleveland. The Browns come down to Cincinnati. What do you think? Are you buying what the Cleveland Browns are selling? Do you think Cleveland's a Super Bowl contender?
Yeah, I was buying Cleveland last year when they hired Kevin Stefanski, an actual real head coach.
Right.
Baker Mayfield the first 2 years there, Hugh Jackson was a mess, and then it was Freddie Kitchens. That was a mess. Then they brought in Odell Beckham Jr. That became, the whole issue and the drama that normally Odell brings with him. But now Odell is coming off of an injury, and he's coming back to a playoff team. And that playoff team is there because of Kevin Stefanski, their head coach. They have one of the best defensive ends in football, Myles Garrett. They're going to have a good defense this year. There's no question about that. And they have probably a top 5 running game. Their running game with Nick Chubb and with Kareem Hunt are as good as anybody in the league. So they are loaded. And, they're one of the top 6 teams in the league right now, Dave. It really comes down to whether or not Baker Mayfield takes that next step. And I wouldn't be surprised somewhere along the line here that he's going to get a contract extension. I can't imagine that they're going to let it go much further and having to pay him even more money next year after this team gets to the playoffs.
And as a former offensive lineman, I think their O-line might be top 3 in the league. I mean, those dudes are pretty damn good up front. So now we're at the bye week. November 14th is the bye week. So we're going to take a little break. Boomer Esiason is our guest. And at the bye week, we'll come back and talk the remaining 8 games of the season for the Cincinnati Bengals.
Hi, Dave Lapham here. Have you heard about In the Trenches with Dave Lapham, presented by First Star Logistics? Catch new episodes from the world of sports and broadcasting. Search for In the Trenches with Dave Lapham on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.